Today on the Sports Trigger, we're going to do a little weekend recap. Travis, you ready to get started?
Let's get it going.
Welcome back to the Sports Trigger, everyone. We're finally back here after Hurricane Irma passed. I had a interesting first hurricane experience, Travis. A lot of no power, some debris, seeing trees completely uprooted, but overall everything's good to go now. So feels good to be back. And well, what I could see, I had no power on Sunday, so I really didn't get to pay attention too much to the NFL, get phone charged and all that for emergency calls. So with that, I can at least touch in on some college football on Saturday. There are a lot of big games that went down in college football in general. So Travis, what were some games and some teams that stood out to you over the weekend?
So I think one game that really stood out to me was the Clemson game, which obviously, that was really hyped up and built up to where Auburn had a great chance, which they did. Their defense played really well. I honestly didn't think Auburn's defense was that good. I think part of that's also where Kelly Bryant and the offense isn't as good as it showed week one, considering the opponent they played. But, I think that was an interesting game. It definitely showed that Auburn and Clemson both have very good defenses. Obviously shows that Auburn's offense isn't ready to take that next step, and I don't think they'll challenge Bama this year just because Stidham got hit so many different times, sacked at least 7 times, I believe.
It was over 10.
But that was
10. Ended up being
over
11,
10.
I think,
over 10. Okay. Okay. And the funny thing is I actually saw that, obviously Clemson has Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence on their line that are most notable, but there was I don't want to say a no name, but someone who doesn't talk about as much that had 4 of the sacks. So, that's definitely saying something. Obviously they're going to pay more attention to those other 2 linemen, but that was a game that stood out to me. It definitely kind of gave a little glimpse of what we can expect moving forward, especially with Louisville coming, or I should say Clemson going to Louisville this next.
Yeah, watching that game, Auburn's actually, I'm going to stick with them for now because their defense is good enough to carry them to get into the national title and take it. So the problem is the offensive line is absolutely terrible. And as we saw that, outside of maybe the first quarter where they're actually able to run the ball decently and they move the ball down the field decently. And so I think that's going to be their trouble. I don't know. Maybe Stidham, maybe he's not the answer at quarterback. Maybe they need to go back to who was starting to get the offense churning at the end of the year last year. This is the second year in a row that Auburn's defense has showed up against Clemson and the offense hasn't. I mean, last year they got beat 19-13 and this year 14-6. So, and last year, in my mind, obviously a much more impressive defensive effort just because you had a solidified starter and Watson on the other side. But this year, still equally impressive. I mean, Kelly, the new quarterback for Clemson can run. He's flat out fast. One of the fastest quarterbacks. Right. Obviously, he's still, not 100% in tune with passing and everything, but he extended a few huge plays there, especially towards the end of the game when it was like 3rd and 7, he eluded a rusher, and then he completed a pass for the first down to Winfro. How do you say his last name? Yeah, Winfro. Yeah, who constantly makes big plays for Clemson. So I'm going to stick with Auburn for now. I'm not just going to bail on it. It's early on. It's a loss to a top 5 team who's obviously, surprisingly enough, really, really good. And you know what? Maybe we need to start tipping the hats because you take them, you take Michigan. Heck, you even take Georgia. You take a lot of these other teams, Ohio State last year, where you're expecting because of turnover, they're not going to be as great, but then they come out and they're firing on all cylinders. They're looking really strong. And so I think it's time that, we start to put Dabo and Clemson maybe up in that echelon of they're just reloading every year. They're not rebuilding at all. So I think that's the biggest takeaway right now from there, I do think Louisville's offense is going to be much better and a bigger challenge for Clemson than Auburn. Louisville's going to spread it out, and they're going to throw a lot more short patterns, where I thought Auburn had a lot of deeper patterns, which kind of confused me, especially when you're having issues protecting in the first place. Another game that I'm going to point out is South Carolina. And you know what? They're looking better and better. I didn't want to overreact after the first week, but this week was a much better win. I'm not going to say Missouri's, world beaters or even up to snuff with maybe Florida or anything like that. But South Carolina is looking like a solid squad. So what's your take on South Carolina? Are they going to be able to challenge any of the teams? Because they're over in the East, right? So you have Florida, you have Tennessee, you have Georgia. Georgia's looking good as well, but I don't know. South Carolina has an offensive firepower that they might be able to challenge in the East sooner than what people thought.
Yeah, I love that game pick actually, because that was something that definitely turned my head this weekend. After Missouri's first week, they put up, I believe, is at least 60 plus, maybe 70 points. And their quarterback Locke, is expected to be a top QB talent. I'm not saying in the same breath as Rosen and, those other players, but he's definitely on the trend up, or he was, at least. But what South Carolina did, very impressive. I don't think that they were talked about that much, if at all, as far as doing anything this year. And you know what? With Georgia's, injury with Eason, obviously Fromm did pretty well against Notre Dame this weekend, unfortunately for me.
And then he has great talent,
he was a top-rated QB.
He has great talent. He has two great running backs. They're going to play in the NFL as long as they don't get hurt again. But yeah, Fromm is definitely no slouch.
They have a great defense. They have two really good running backs in Chubb and Michelle. And so, you know what? I think that it'll be between them and South Carolina now. I mean, I don't know what to expect out of Florida. Even if Florida finds a QB, which whatever they do end up landing on, I don't think it's going to be enough to challenge and go up against these tough defenses. I just really don't. I think this is the year that Florida doesn't win that division. It'll be up to South Carolina or Georgia, and, winner will play Auburn or Alabama.
I think South Carolina definitely has a chance. I think the problem with Georgia is their offense hasn't been flashy, and you know what? Florida's defense is still, they're pretty good. They're still pretty good. And how much do they have to be kicking themselves for not having Will Grier? I mean, just seeing Grier play pretty well over at West Virginia, it's just got to be like, man, was that the guy? But these are all they have a whole bunch of 5-star guys anyway, so let's not pretend like it's slouches, but maybe it's time that we say they aren't as talented or haven't developed the talent around those QBs as well. I mean, you can't. I
definitely think it's the second part. The second part where they haven't developed.
How long can you put the issue on the QB?
Right.
Because there comes a time, you keep putting 5-star QBs in there. Eventually, you have to sit there and be like, well, maybe it's not just the QB. Maybe it's the talent. Maybe it's the play callers. I think they need to look at that. But I see Florida, Georgia. I think Florida will beat Georgia. Just personally, I think it'll be a really low-scoring game, but we'll see about that. I actually think the Tennessee-Florida game really interests me because Tennessee, I didn't expect much this year, but they're looking okay so far. So let's see how that Tennessee-Florida game goes. And if Tennessee comes out on top, I mean, you might have a Tennessee versus South Carolina to determine who wins the East over there.
I mean, I definitely didn't expect much out of Tennessee, especially after all the hype they got last year. Yeah. They had, Dobson, they had Kamara, so on and so forth. So, I mean, they could. You never know. This could be the year when people aren't talking about them that they actually do something in the SEC.
I hold off on the Tennessee hype train just because they haven't really played anybody yet, and every year they've been a 7-5 team practically. So I don't. But South Carolina, I'm actually starting to lean towards that way. We'll see after they play a little better competition as well. But I thought Missouri was a good show of, maybe they can, put a little wrinkle there in the East. Just talk briefly about the Big Ten. Ohio State, terrible offense still. So maybe it's the personnel. I don't know. I mean, you have some fast running backs. The receivers, definitely not there. Connection with JT Barrett. Maybe it's the QB, but the defense looked terrible as well. I mean, you have Shiano saying, oh, these are better than my Bucs defensive line, and then you know what? Oklahoma ran the ball on them, and they threw the ball against it. So whatever, Ohio State, yeah, everybody wants to they'll probably still run through the Big Ten and maybe lose one at tops in the Big Ten, maybe two, just because, the Big Ten, I hate to say it's overrated, and, Michigan's offense looks absolutely atrocious, so it could be, with Michigan and, Penn State can score on Ohio State. I have no, problem voicing that, but Michigan and Ohio State could be another 17-14 game because neither offense can score. And so who knows what will happen with that. So that's all I have to say about the Big Ten. I mean, Penn State still looks impressive. They looked really impressive against Pitt. But the Pac-12, yeah, you touched on it earlier. You know what? Oregon might be back.
They are extremely impressive. Granted, the teams they've played aren't the best, but, I mean, still, after what they did the first week, you beat a Nebraska team that, isn't too bad. It's a Big Ten team, right? So probably in the upper half, not like at the very top, but very impressive numbers. You have a really good running back in Freeman back there, and then you have the QB, I believe it's Hubert, something like that. Very impressive, and the defense not great, but better. And I mean, it's hard to get worse from last year.
Yeah,
but
they can't get worse than last year. But you know what? The great thing seen is Oregon lighting up the scoreboard again. So that's the fun. When you watch Oregon games, you want points, and that's what they've always been able to do.
The Duck doing push-ups.
You want to see some highlights of the Duck doing push-up. Oregon, Washington State didn't look that good. Colorado might be a sleeper. They're actually looking better than what I thought they would be this year. And then USC. I mean, USC, Washington. I don't count out Stanford. They're still a solid team.
USC will lose at least one Pac-12 game, and Stanford will still be in it at the very end of the year. Mark my words.
I tell you what, Stanford got USC at a bad time because everybody was doubting Darnold, and then he just went out and had a phenomenal game. So,
at home, at USC.
That was bad timing for them. I mean, if he would have had a great first week, we might be talking about a completely different result going in. But Love still had 160 yards in the first quarter, I think, or first quarter and a half.
He tore them up. He tore them up.
He's still somebody to watch. I mean, that's awesome. That's great offense. Just great timing to watch and everything. So, with that being said, guys, thanks a lot for joining us on another episode at the Sports Trigger, and until next time.